What I would ask is for each panelist to take a minute or two and introduce yourself, and then we'll pose a couple of questions and then open it up to the floor for some more questions. And I'm going to pass this mic off to you, and you guys can pass it around up there.
Hi, it's so good to be, talking all right? Hi, it's so good to be here with you. My name is Gary Black, and for my whole work career, over 50 years, I've been with a family business called Condi's Foods, and we're in the fresh produce business and a fresh produce processor. So most of the things that we sell, we've changed. It was a family business. It was really great working with my dad and my two brothers, and then in 2000, I bought them out, and I now have a daughter, a son, and a son-in-law that are in the business with me. I came up here years ago, and all my kids followed me, so they've all been here and all graduated from Utah State, and it's home to us. I sit here in this wonderful room, and I think back in the 1960s when just across the sidewalk out front where the library is, there was a temporary building, and I had classes in this temporary building, and you can imagine a wood frame building with, you'd go up wooden steps to get into it, and it was nothing like what you have here today. So enjoy this, and it'll be fun to share some negotiation experiences I have with you, and good to be here, so thank you.
I'm Roger McComber, and I'm up from Dallas, Texas, and I've spent most of my career in investments and finance. Actually was in your position in 89, 90. Graduated, got my master's from here, and did an internship in New York City, and ended up getting a full-time position at Salomon Brothers in about 89, 90, and spent the next 14 years on Wall Street. So that's where I spent most of my career. Moved to Dallas to start an energy hedge fund, and if any of you have seen The Big Short, I can talk about that because if you recall, the movie starts at Salomon Brothers. That's where I started, and it ends at Lehman Brothers in a not so pleasant way, and that's where I ended my career too. And so lots to talk about on that, maybe at a different time. But in Texas, I ended up doing mostly private equity, and that's what I've been doing up to this point, and could probably bring some of those stories into the discussion here. But great to be here, and I'm excited for you guys to be here at Utah State and the Huntsman Business School. It's a great opportunity to be where you are.
Good morning. My name's Boyd Craig. I spent my career as Stephen Covey's partner, running his global consulting business and writing books on leadership with him. I worked with him almost 25 years, and about 5 years ago, about the time he passed away, I left Franklin Covey and started a foundation that's focused on developing leadership skills in children in public schools across the country. It's called leader.org, and we're working with, in just 4 years, we've got 650 K-12 elementary schools in 30 different states that we're supporting in transforming their culture and developing 21st century leadership skills in children using these same principles I worked with my whole career. And love the work I'm doing. I'm married, have 3 children, all married, 3 grandchildren, and love this school. I'm not a graduate of Utah State. I got my degrees at BYU. Thanks, Roger. But I'm an adopted Aggie, and love and believe in this school and its future. So it's really a great pleasure to be with you today.
What I'd love to ask at this point is if you could share any, whether it's a job offer negotiation or any other negotiation, or even more broadly a conflict resolution situation that you each have had that really maybe changed the way you thought about negotiation, or where you
Okay, I had a different negotiation story that I was thinking about, but I will change course here. And here a few years ago, a merger and acquisition company approached us, and they had a buyer that was interested in buying my company. And so it was very interesting going through this process. We developed a relationship with this new company. There was a good energy between us, my management team and their management team. We got along very well. Being in the produce business, this company is a large tomato grower on the East Coast, and they were wanting to expand out into the West Coast. They have a proprietary high flavor tomato that they wanted to bring out here, and so that's why they were looking for somebody to partner with them and to distribute them in this area. And tomatoes are a big part of our business. As we went along through this negotiation, it was very interesting, and part of it hinged on being able to grow this variety of tomato in the West Coast. These tomatoes are grown in Georgia and Florida and the Carolinas, and for part of the year they would have come out of there, but the other part of the year they would have needed to come out of Mexico and California. And the growing trials failed, and so that ended our negotiation. And that was kind of something that we thought was a good, or not, the business opportunity was a good for us because it would grow our business, and that's something we're looking to do. And so we were disappointed. These people, we are still friends with them today, but then from this negotiation, this acquisition company brought somebody else to us, and it was an entirely different company in that it was just a equity company looking in acquiring and growing businesses and then would probably sell them. And so as we developed a relationship with this company, and when you go through this, there's a lot of information that passes hands. There are confidentiality agreements, and you have to have your financial statements and customer lists and products and growth plans, and it is just in-depth, a lot of work to get to this point. And this company actually came and made an offer, but as we thought about it, we turned it down. And we turned it down because we were looking for a company that would bring business to us and that we could grow mutually. We weren't really looking for a company that would acquire us and then try to grow it and maybe in a few years look to spin it off. And so that was a recent negotiation. Interestingly enough, being in the produce business, I know growers and farmers and shippers all over the country, and just this last week I had another large Florida tomato company approach us, and we're meeting on the 1st of November and discuss if they would be interested in us. So that was what I'd like to share at this time.
In thinking about this a little bit more, one experience that came to mind back in the 90s, I was at a conference in New York City, and Henry Kissinger spoke at that conference on negotiating. And he's a pretty good negotiator. He's known for that. And one thing he said at that conference that I'm still trying to understand, and I think I understand it more now, and I'm working on it, but he said the key point to good negotiating is to say, a lot. And I thought, okay, I'm taking notes, and I'm going, that's not what I expected to write down, is just, He said, you have to say, a lot. And so I think what I now appreciate about that comment and what he was saying is you have to be in a strong position before you go in to that negotiating environment. Now I'm going to pull it back a little bit and take a step back here and say, let's look at negotiating on a conceptual level. You're negotiating with everything. I'll tell you a story about where I sold a company a year ago in negotiating. But these are going to be the same principles that you're going to use when you're interviewing. These are going to be the same principles that you're going to be using when you're talking to a boss for a raise. And it's what Henry Kissinger said about being able to say is being able to prepare yourself before that negotiation in a way that you're in what I call a power position. And so I think, in my opinion, that a majority of the negotiating or preparation for that happens before the meeting. And you need to go in with your strongest power position. Because once you're in that meeting, whether it's an interview, whether it's selling a company, and that, the person with the most power needs it the least. Okay? So the person with the most power needs the deal the least. For example, if you're going into an interview and you already have 3 job offers, and you're like, I'm going to go into this interview anyway just for practice. It's a good idea, by the way. And I'm going to get this interview. You're going to go in with a lot more confidence because this person interviewing you is seeing your skills and your great GPA and all these things, and they're saying, you know what, I really want this person. And you're thinking to yourself, I might want this job. I might not want this job. Who has the most power in that position? And that's the power position that you want to be in. So one last story, one example, and I'll hand it to Boyd. So a year ago, I sold a company that I was involved with called Eagleview. They're based up in Seattle. And our focus was on making this little startup company a solid, viable company that adds value to our customers. Now, there were other board members and other people who said, well, we want to get this to sell it. We want to be able to sell this company. And I would always say, that's not our goal. If that happens, if that's a result, if that's a symptom, that's great. But our goal is to focus on what we have control over and do the best we can in making a viable product and company. And sure enough, as we did that, we got a phone call from a couple companies, and they said, we want to acquire you. And we went into the negotiations, and there were a few people that were pretty nervous about it, and what do we do? What do we say? How do we do this? I said, relax. We're in a power position. We do this well, and we don't need this acquisition. They want us more than we want them. And that's the power position that we wanted to be in. And the negotiations went well, and we ended up selling the company. So.
Gary, let me say you kind of reiterated what I spent several weeks in the negotiation class emphasizing from Pat is probably 80% of success in negotiation lies in our preparation. And if we haven't prepared, we have to focus on service level. So thank you for
Thank you. So let me piggyback on what you shared, Roger, and maybe give a complementary dimension to what it means to be in a power position. And it's probably not a traditional view. But it comes from the idea that you may not always start in a position of power. You may not have all the cards, but it does not mean you cannot be powerful. And here's what I mean. Let me give a story to illustrate, and then I'll share the insight. I worked for many years with one of the top publishing houses in the country. And part of what we did was write and work with this publisher to publish books that there was an expectation they'd be national bestsellers, books by Stephen Covey. And in one of the books we worked on, we got this idea, very non-traditional, that we wanted to stick a DVD of illustrative movies in the back of the book. Now, if you're a publisher, what does that mean to you? Some author that has a lot of influence has this idea that's way outside of bounds of what you know works in the publishing world. What are you thinking if you're the publisher? Anyone? Cost. Cost ruins this book project. It takes away the profit, and the author wants us to pay for it. So how do you think the conversation went when we brought this, what we thought was very bold, innovative thinking to a book? And you've got a publisher that's just thinking about cost, and I'm not going to make any money off this. How do you think the conversation goes? This is a very important asset to you, this author. So you don't want to offend him. But how do you think it went? Polite, but went nowhere. Well, you can give up on an idea, but we were convinced that this was a very powerful idea, and we wanted to move the dinosaur. We wanted to kick the dinosaur to do something innovative. Well, for weeks and even months, we had these conversations back and forth, and they literally went nowhere. Why do you think it went nowhere? Anyone?
I'd say you both felt like you were in a position of power, either one.
Yeah, in a sense you were. Both were. Why else was it going nowhere? They didn't want to give up anything. We didn't want to give up anything. Why else? Yeah.
Maybe the vision wasn't conveyed correctly to either party?
So both parties sort of shared their vision, but it still went nowhere. Why?
Because they hadn't thought about habit number 7.
Yeah. So, Doug, you're putting your finger on it. No one was listening. They were in their own head, their own world. So one day, because I kind of had the job to make it happen. No was not an answer for the author. So I'm in between them. So I thought, if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to keep being stuck. So I reached out. I flew to New York. And I said, can you please help me understand your world around this issue? Why is it that you're so resistant to someone so important to you? And it was like the floodgate opened. And at first they were a little unsure. They thought this was a negotiating ploy. But they could tell I was sincere because I kept asking questions deeper and deeper to understand the cost structure of their book. What would the DVD cost? How would it increase their production costs? How would it impact the timing of what, because this was not part of their system. And the more I listened and the more I probed to understand, what do you expect happened in the relationship? All I was focused on was them. And soon they discovered I wasn't manipulating. What do you think happened? Yeah, trust. What else? What? Yeah, honesty. People start getting very authentic. There was no more positioning. There was no more of the garbage that goes on in a lot of negotiating. It's the appearance, it's the position, it's all these things. And what they saw is this guy is really sincere. And they said to me after I spent the day with them, and then we kept talking over a couple of weeks. One day, one of the top executives said, you know, Boyd, in the 20 years we've worked with your organization, this is the first time we've actually felt that anyone understood what we do and what the real issues are. Well, once I got this deep understanding, what do you think happened to their openness to this crazy idea? They said, well, can you help us understand more about why? what you think will happen. And our willingness to pay the price of sacrificing my position to understand another person, another organization's interests, and for them to experience I'm an advocate for their position, their success, because these guys were partners. This wasn't just a one-off negotiation. This is someone we expect to work with for 100 years. So you can't just get what you want out of a long-term partnership. So they finally thought, you know what, they are looking out for our interest, and because of this deep understanding I gained, by probing and listening and being influenceable by them, I knew their hot-button issues. I knew what they wanted and needed. And suddenly, I had all sorts of created options that, yes, you could say may have thought it's a compromise on my part, but it wasn't a compromise. It was just coming up with things that deals with their needs that also holds on to mine. And within a few days, we agreed to do the deal. We agreed to pay for the extra cost of production up to a certain success level. After that, they agreed to pick up the rest of it. So this win-win isn't just touchy-feely garbage. This deep commitment to understanding, partnering, and long-term win, there is power. And what I want to say to you to piggyback back on what he shared is there is more than just position power. That's not all you were saying. There's more than just preparation power. There's power in understanding the highest and greatest needs of the person you want to do a deal with. Because then you have a field to be truly creative in coming up with a deal that's not a lose for you. It's a bigger win and better than what you were both thinking of because you create it together.
Talk all about interest-based negotiation, which is what you're talking about, getting that win-win. Is there anything, do you have maybe a job offer situation where you're involved in either as a candidate or
Yeah.
the offer where you can kind of talk
So let me talk about the job offer situation. In our experience, most young people or older people like you approaching a company wanting a job, do you know what you are to them? Because of the way you approach them? You're a problem and a hassle. You're a problem because you're sending your resume with your head and how much money you want to make. Now, you aren't really potentially you're not a problem, potentially you're something very different. But the problem with most people is they never get out of their own head when they're thinking about getting a job or getting a raise. Here's the contrast. What if your number one job were to figure out the highest and most pressing need and problem of the company or executive you're wanting to work for? If you're able to articulate, perhaps even better than they can, their need and problem, and that's not gained easily, but if you're able to do that, are you a problem to them? Particularly if you can describe their problem and also position yourself as a solution to their problem. Are you a problem still? Are you a hassle? Another person in that stack of resumes that wants something from me? What are you now? You're an asset. What's another word for that? You're a solution. If you become a solution to their greatest need and problem, what does that do to your negotiating? You're not trying to get the most money you can. All of a sudden, the conversation changed, but you can say, what would it be worth to you, Roger, if I could solve this problem for you? Now it's a business discussion. You're a solution to my greatest business problem. So my point is less a story. I could share stories with you. But I've seen that young people who take this approach, who decide to deeply understand very creatively what an organization and person's greatest need and problem is, and make a presentation that shows your understanding of not only their problem, but maybe their customer's greatest problem, with insight, having interviewed other people in the company, having interviewed and done research on their customers and their challenges, you bring that kind of insight and then share what you'd like to do to solve that problem. That kind of person almost always gets the job they want. They may not get it immediately when they want it, but it becomes so compelling, they will get the job. Or they will find a company that they can become the best solution for. So I guess my job or my raise insight is become a solution, don't be another problem.
I just want to add one thing on that. That's a wonderful concept to keep in mind. I mean, the whole thing that Boyd was talking about is embodied in empathy, which there's a big shortage of in this world. Empathy, understanding, and listening. If you understand the needs of the person on the other side of the table, that's preparing you in a very strong way in your whole negotiations. One specific question that I would just throw in on and what Boyd was talking about, and one that I've found as a very powerful question in an interview, in a job interview, is simply the question, and I think it's fundamental to the whole experience of the interview, is how can I add value to your company? How can I add value to your company? When you ask that, it will change the entire atmosphere. Like Boyd said, instead of coming in and saying, oh, you know, here's another problem, here's the headache, I have to work through this, all of a sudden he's like, really? That's what you're coming in for, is you're trying to find solutions? Wow. And here's someone coming in and asking for a job and not saying, here's the money I want, and here's the hours I'm going to put in, and here's the title I want. No, here's someone coming in saying, how can I add value to your company? That's a powerful position to be in.
All right. Any other kind of general or maybe specific advice you want to give on job offer negotiations before we open it up for questions?
Over the years, I've had an awful lot of employees, and there's been good employees and bad employees, but there is a special employee that I've appreciated, and this is an employee that's come to work for me and really hasn't asked, how much are you going to pay me? They just come to work and they do a great job, and when you're raising wages and advancing people, they're the people that get the advancement, and they're the people that get a higher pay. As an employer, sometimes there's a little bit of offensiveness if somebody comes to be hired and the first thing they ask is, how much you're going to pay me. And it goes along with what Craig and Roger said. It's the value that you bring with you, and then once you perform, then you can, you know, inquire about higher pay. Recently we had our sales manager that came to us and asked for a pay raise, and we reviewed his performance and his work, and he had done such a great job, you know, that it was easy to do and something we wanted to do because we wanted to reward him and we wanted to retain him. And so really it's like they say, what you offer and what you bring to the table. And that's why you guys are doing the right thing here, getting a good education and developing those skills that'll have you bring value to the bargain.
So you mentioned like
where do you think the line is drawn, if you're from like a boss standpoint of saying, oh, you're going to tell me how to run my business? What would you guys say?
Roger.
You know, it's more of an art than it is a science. There's on this, as many things in business are, but in I think what you're asking is whether it's an interview or negotiating with a boss with a pay raise or something like that. How do you go in and not in a position where you're saying, here's what I've done, here's what I need, and I'm going to have it or else, right? So that's kind of a threatening approach. And that's a desperate approach. That's not a power position. That's you coming in saying, this is how it is, that's what, you know, what Craig built and explained here was, let's create a cooperative environment, not just a competitive environment. The cooperative environment is where the real success happens. Now there's competition within the cooperative environment. I understand, and it's great, and it's wonderful, and it's fun. But the real power and the real benefit comes from when you approach and say, I understand your needs because I've thought about them. And I've thought about them so much that I have some proposals and some possible solutions. What do you think? And that's a more cooperative approach.
You know, what you're describing, Roger, is the spirit of humility. You know, you come into a situation where even when you've done your homework and you somehow project that you know it all, that you've come up with the solution that's going to solve all their problems, it's going to be very offensive because this guy's going to go, you know nothing. It's not that he doesn't want your fresh ideas, it's just you come in presuming, and it's arrogant, and it's a little bit, it's uninformed. So you come into it with the spirit of humility saying, one, asking the question, I'd love to know what your greatest need and challenge is, or what the greatest need and challenge of your most important customers is. The fact that you've done the homework just sets you up for this conversation, but it's the spirit of humility, teachability, passion. What they want to know is your passion, your level of preparation, your willingness to be teachable, your willingness to share. But I've also seen potential job applicants really bomb out because they came in with all the answers, and it turned off that founder like that. Because it suddenly, you know, I label you is you think you know it all and you haven't been through it like I am. But if you come in with the spirit of teachability, learning, asking questions, showing a lot of initiative in what you've tried to learn, and share ideas and say, you know, I've got some thoughts. They're probably not complete. But what I want you to know is I'm passionate about finding solutions and solving your problem. So you combine passion with teachability and doing your homework, you're not going to offend someone. You come in trying to be confident and that you know it all, you're going to turn them off. So does that get at your question? Yeah.
If you guys had to boil your success down to one attribute, what attribute would you say has propelled you the furthest in your career?
For me, that's a really easy question to answer. And I'll answer it this way. Over the years, we've hired a lot of people, and they come on board. And when you hire them, you do the best job you can to see how good of a candidate they are. But you really never know how they're going to turn out until you've worked with them for a few months. And some of them are great, and some of them aren't so great. But there's one thing that I've, over the years, found to appreciate in certain individuals that we've hired, and there's really not a scientific word to describe it, but I describe it as the ability to get something done. And It's like Facebook and Mark, is it Zuckerberg? He came up with that idea, but some other guys said we had the idea first. And I've often looked back and thought, if the other guys had had that ball and they would have run with it, it wouldn't be anywhere where it's at today. Mark Zuckerberg had this ability to get something done, and it's been an amazing thing that he's done. And I've had some employees that have come in and done that. I grew up on a farm, and my brothers, and there's a special lesson you learn growing up on a farm, and I think my brothers and myself had this ability to make things happen. And it's not easy. It's perseverance, and it's energy and not giving up, but that's my answer, is the ability to make something happen.
I'm sure Gary can tell you many creative ways to use baling wire.
I
then.
can.
And so I would just piggyback, say a couple words. Problem solving. They have to be actively problem solving. Innovative. And proactive. Take the initiative.
I'd probably sum it up personally as a saying that Stephen Covey taught me all the time. Life is a mission, not a career. What does that mean? It means try to discover what you're good at. What's your talent? What have you been always good at since you were little? Natively good at. 2, what do you love doing? What fuels your passion? 3, what do you feel like you should do? Something you can do to really make a difference, a contribution that your conscience informs you on. And 4th, what's the overlap of those 3 things in a job that someone will pay you to do? You might have passion about, looking at trees, but there may not be anyone that'll pay you to do it. So if you can find the overlapping of those 4 things, what do you love? What are you good at? What do you feel you should do that'll make a difference, that someone will pay you to do? Then you don't have to worry about your career, because you'll have people who want you. And instead of thinking, I got to talk someone into hiring me, you'll find that it's about finding the right match of someone you can really make a difference with those 4 things. And that's what I've tried to do. And it's never failed me. That's what I'd say.
I'll give it a quick shot. I've always said that to students, and I've done this for many years, and I'll say the same thing again, is I want you to learn how to read, write, think, and communicate. If you can read, write, think, and communicate well, okay, and you have to work at it. I'm still working at it. I'm trying to do those things. If you can do that and understand those things, then you're going to be able to take what Gary and what Boyd have said, what we've been talking about here, and be able to apply that. So bring that to the level of negotiation skills then. You'll be able to understand what it means that a powerful position doesn't mean that you're coming in and you're the strongest, most aggressive, meanest guy in the room. It means you're actually the most humble. you're actually the most prepared. You've done your homework. You're actually the most knowledgeable. That's what it means to be able to be aware that it's things are seldom what they seem. Okay, we learn that through Shakespeare. We learn that through life. All right, and when you think of a powerful negotiator, what comes to your mind might be the exact opposite. Because a powerful negotiator is what we've been talking about, what Boyd, what Gary, we've been talking about here. And it might be the opposite of that, where it's humble, it's prepared, and that's a powerful position.
I'd like to talk about something a little different, and that is scarcity. And when our ancestors that were hunters and gatherers, they went around picking up their food, and if there was a shortage of nuts, why then something kicked in where they searched harder and they focused in and were able to exist on a less supply. Something that's in our culture here is we talk about food storage and being prepared for the future, and that's an emotional subject. Many people are worried about having something in their basement to live off of in case something happens, and so it's an emotional thing. Well, in my business, being a fresh item is picked in the field and off to the grocery store or the restaurant in a hurry, and so it has to be a constant supply. And there has been a few times where the scarcity situation has come into play. And if the market goes up on a commodity, and I'm thinking of tomatoes, but if it goes up $2 or $3 a box, the buyers, and these are people that you sell day in and day out for many, many years, they get upset. They do not want to pay more money, and there's a pushback. But as the market gets so high, then it changes. And right now, Hurricane Matthew is hitting Florida. And Florida has 30,000 acres of winter vegetables that they grow. And so I can tell you, depending on the damage, there's going to be a shortage of tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers. And as in the past, I've had buyers come to me and say, if you look at Wendy's, they have to have a slice of tomato on their hamburger. It's their premium hamburger. They get $2 more than just a little hamburger. And so there reaches a point when a box of tomatoes is $30 or more. I've had buyers come to me, you can't let me run out. I will pay anything for a box of tomatoes. And so this scarcity factor, and I want to tie that in with your question, you, as you leave this school, if you think about the scarcity factor, if everybody in the school wanted to be a salesperson and they went out, there might be a lot of competition. But if you can choose a career that lines up with your talents, but yet it's not an over-flooded market, and then there's a greater demand for your services. And so that is something that you could think about and that can change markets. It's you look at the medical profession, how there's a need for doctors. But to tie in with what Craig and Roger said, along with this scarcity, you can look at it that how can you make yourself more valuable? Because if you're more valuable and have better skills and talent and energy level, then you're already a scarce commodity. And so scarcity is something that can influence your career.
I think the thing I'd summarize of what you can do right now, no matter what stage you're at in completing your degree, is start to practice and develop the skill of creating a third alternative to solution to any problem you face with another person. Your roommate, your spouse, someone who you study with, your sibling, whoever it is, which is the idea that you come up against a problem or a difference with someone, and then you just decide my job is not just win or lose, I get my way or you get yours, But I'm going to figure out what those two things are enough so that we can create a third alternative solution that neither of us were thinking of before, that's better than what either of us were thinking before, and that we're both happy with. There's a great book, which is the last book that Stephen Covey wrote before he passed away, called The Third Alternative. I commend it to you. It's a pretty thick book, but what I really commend to you is to get the idea, the basic process in your head, and develop this skill in your heart and in your ability to communicate so that this can become a reflex to you. It's not practice. It's just part of who you are and what you do when you face a problem. It will be an amazing skill and mindset and heart set that will really serve you well in any problem or negotiation that you face. And it takes time and practice. If you're married, practice on it with your wife, because or your husband, you'll have lots of opportunities with differences, or someone you're dating, or your roommate, or whoever it might be. And it's incredible.